Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution mod spotlights, or from the Accurate Dinosaur mod collection. So we're going to have a look at a bunch of different mods that people have been making, that have been both animals that are remakes, and we've got a couple remakes here which is pretty cool, and also some new species, and talk about them and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today I'm going to be starting with a couple really nice remakes here. These were both done by Echo Green. We have got two Stegosaurs, so the Stegosaur reworks. So we're going to be starting with one of our favourite little Asian Stegosaurs, Spinosaurus. So let's see him go for. He's going for a drink, I bet. So wait till he stops, and then we'll get a good look at him. Look at him go. You see, he already looks so much nicer. Where he's coming. We'll stop him here and get a good look at him. Look at this wonderful man. So we all know Spinosaurus. So he is a stegosaur from the late Jurassic, a genus of ornithischian dinosaur, and found in China. So obviously he gets this name Spinosaurus from this giant spine that he has on his shoulder here. Very defining characteristic of this animal. Really interesting. So these guys are pretty cool. They were a medium-sized stegosaur. They're believed to be about 4.2 meters long, or 14 feet long, and 700 kilograms. And obviously you can see, as I mentioned, you got his name from this big spine here. It's also got relatively small dorsal plates, unlike a lot of animals like Stegosaurus that have these huge plates. His are much smaller. But also he has these giant shoulder spikes, as you see here, and then these really cool, like, sort of spiky plates at the back here. And you can see he's also got a small amount of thagomizers here, kind of the stereotypical 4 that you see in most stegosaurs. And you can see he's also got these very, very wide hips and all that. Really, really cool animal with these robust forelimbs that really show off this form here. Really, really great animal, wouldn't you agree? And it's awesome. There are skin impressions of this guy that were described in 2008. There was a surface about 414 square centimeters that shows rosettes with a central polygonal or hexagonal scales surrounded by the 13th and 14th ridge, 13 to 14 ridged smaller squares that are a diameter of about 5.7 to 9.2 centimeters. So this is not quite too far off what we know of it. Really, really interesting. It's got like these really big scales and kind of flow to it. It's a really nice design here. And this guy's also the most basal known member of the Stegosauria, and places it. And some people also place it within Huangosauridae, which obviously shares with animals such as Chunkingosaurus and Huangosaurus, which are both in the game. And this is why it's considered the most basal stegosaur, or at least one of them. Huangosaurus was a basal. Let's have a look at you here. Interesting, man. One interesting thing as well, it was considered a nomadoumium by the West until about 2006, where there was an abstract submitted to, I think it was one of these many organizations for paleo, and where they're like, okay, this is actually a genuine species, just because they didn't really have enough information. But the holotype is up to from the Upper Formation of Xiaogong, which is dated back to the Oxfordian, so the late Jurassic. And there's also other parts. There's a subadult with a piece of tail missing and a skull and all that. Really, really interesting animal. So yeah, he's got the wrong toes. But now we're moving on from the next one. We have got Kentosaurus, everyone's favorite. This was also done by Echo Green in that same pack. So let's have a look at our Kentosaurus. So we got this wonderful animal here. He's probably going to go for a drink again. See the difference of the models. You can see he's being thinned up. He's got thicker forelimbs. There's this guy as well. Really looks wonderful. And this guy got like the similar treatment. You can see he looks a little bit more accurate to the fossil. You can see these wonderful big spikes he has down and go on his back. So let's have a look at him. Look at him. And he's got like a longer neck as well, which is a characteristic of more derived stegosaurs. And also this big spike here that should probably be at his hip. It's a bit of a controversy there, which is pretty fun. But yeah, Kentosaurus is a stegosaurian dinosaur, a much more derived member of Stegosauridae compared to animals like Euangosaurus and Spinosaurus. And these guys were discovered by a German paleontologist, Edward Hearn, I believe it's pronounced it, I can't really speak German, in 1915. And fossils of these guys have been found from the Tindaguru Formation, dating from the late Carolingian to Thorian ages, about 152 million years ago, with hundreds of bones being found from East Africa. So we don't really have a complete animal, but we have enough to pretty much create a whole animal, just because we have so many. And Kentosaurus generally measures about 4.5 meters long, or 15 feet in length as an adult, and weighed up to a ton. And you can see it walked on all fours here, kind of similar to all other stegosaurs. And he had a small elongated head, which he used to bite off plants and such. You can see the differences from the original model, a lot more skinny and lithe. Also, these plates have been exaggerated a lot more. And the longer spikes that you can see here around the tail end, that's believed to be to defend the animal, but it's very possible as well that could be like a sexual display as well. I think that sexual display is a very underrated thing when considering dinosaurs. He's still a wonderful animal here. And you can see he's got these double rows of smaller plates going down his neck until it reaches the spikes down the tail, orthagomizers. And there is this long spike on each shoulder, which may be on the hip actually. And there's actually believed to be two sort of morphs. There's one with larger thigh bones, and maybe one sex may have been larger or more stout than the other. Some slight sexual dimorphism, which is pretty cool. And this guy's, as I mentioned, pretty small. A length of about 5.5 meters and weight about a little over a ton. About a ton, yeah. Sort of really cool animal. Let's watch him drink. Really wonderful. So this guy would have lived in, would have been a herbivore, eating a bunch of low-growing plants and such. We would have just kind of been doing his thing like a normal stegosaur would. And apparently these tail was highly mobile, so it really been good for attacking animals such as predators, or as I mentioned, other male Kentosauruses, and it believed to be also used like a porcupine. And another really interesting thing is that these guys studied the bone histology to see how Kentosaurus grew, and it turns out they may have had a relatively higher growth rate compared to Stegosaurus and Chauliodus, which is pretty rapid. And this is weird because usually you think bigger animals grow faster, but he actually grew faster than Stegosaurus, so it's possible that these guys just matured faster, some other factors to go into it. Really interesting. And this guy lived in the late Tindaguru Formation in the late Jurassic, and it was a very shallow floodplain, had all sorts of different tidal things. It was kind of similar to the Morrison Formation, except it had some marine interbeds, and it has animals such as Giraffe Titan, Dinosaur, Dicraeosaurus, Europasaurus, and a bunch of other cool animals living with it. So yeah, really cool. So now we'll be moving on from the Stegosaur rework pack. We can see the differences. Doesn't look wonderful. We're moving on to a new animal. So this one was done by Kevrind Art, or I believe I pronounced it, and Huta DLY or DY. We have got Vesculosaurus. So let's grab him out. So we've got Vesculosaurus here, whose name means godlike lizard, which is obviously very accurate considering how beautiful this man is. I really love it. So he is a small Neo-Ornithischian dinosaur that comes from the very end of the late Cretaceous period. He lives in the Hell Creek Formation and a bunch of other formations similar to that, like the Lance and Scoliod formations, and lived with animals like Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, things like that, and is prominent in Saurian, which is the design you can see this one is based off. Very much reminiscent of the Saurian design with the tail and such, and the feathers. It's always a really nice design. Saurian designs are always some of the best in the paleo community. So this guy was also one of the last dinosaurs from the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event, so that's right when it went extinct. And this guy is known from several partial skeletons and skulls that indicate that it grew to about 2.5 to 4 meters, so 8.2 feet to 13 feet long in length on average, and has these really sturdy hind limbs, small wide hands, and a little head with an elongate pointed snout. And you can see this guy had the form of the teeth and stuff suggests that this guy is a herbivore, or a small herbivore like that, and is also regarded to be a very specialized Neo-Ornithischian, traditionally described as a Hypsilophodont, but more recognized to be distinct from Hypsilophodon. And there have been several species described from these T. neglectus, T. gaboni, and T. esteboniensis, I believe. Those are the three. And yeah, as I mentioned, found in all sorts of different formations. Hell Creek, I think Nambaro, maybe. Lance Creek as well. Lance Formation, I mean. It was a pretty big animal, as I mentioned, and some of the weights for these guys have been estimated about 200 to 300 kilograms, along with the 4.5 meter range you can see here. And yeah, it's described to be a very basal kind of animal, derived near the Ornithischian, but that's basal to the tree of Ornithischians by the looks of it. So related to animals like Parkosaurus and Chauliodus. These guys would have been specialized to be browsing at the first meter or so, kind of just grabbing what they can, and maybe specialized with these mouth, with the cheeks in their mouth for chewing, and are probably a lot slower than other Hypsilophodonts or other Neo-Ornithischians because they have a much heavier build and leg structure. And they have a very unusual hind limbs, so that's the upper leg is longer than the shin, which is the opposite of animals like Hypsilophodon, which are believed to be fast runners. And there's one specimen that's also known that has a pathology with toe bones on the right foot fused at the top, and that hindered their movement. So it's very possible that animal struggled a little bit in life, and that may have not been what killed it. See, also this guy, as I mentioned, found in Hell Creek Formation, which is very much a swamp, or like coastal with like redwoods and stuff, like a floodplain. It's very subtropical. It also would have been found with animals like Triceratops, Torosaurus, Edmontosaurus, and Chinlesaurus, Ornithomimus, Pterodon, and Tyrannosaurus. So very, very common. And one thing cool about this whale is we know about its growth. So this guy would have taken about 9 years to mature, and that shows some of the variability in dinosaurs. You can see some dinosaurs that grew super fast, like the sauropods, that would have been like full grown in like 20 years. But this guy would have been fully grown in about 9 years, and he's nowhere near the size of these large sauropods. So I think that's very, very interesting. And now he's run off for a good feed. Wonderful little fellow. So now let's move on to the next animal. So we're moving on from Vesculosaurus. We're moving on to an animal that's a bit more modern. So this is by Joserbia, or Joseba, however you pronounce it. We have got the Dodo. Pretty cute. So let's see where he's going off to. He's going to grab a feed. Look at him go. Let's get him while he's there. Look at him. Look at this wonderful Dodo. Probably not the most accurate colours, but still a nice sort of model regardless. So this is the Dodo, which was an extinct flightless bird. It's actually a type of pigeon that was endemic to the island of Mauritius, that's off the east coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. The closest genetic relative to this guy was the Rodriguez solitarius, And the two live in the subfamily Raphinidae with pigeons and doves. And the closest living relative to this guy is a Nicobar parakeet. Not parakeet, a pigeon. And the white dodo was once thought to have existed on the nearby island of Reunion, though it's believed that this may have been the Reunion ibis. So, as I mentioned, these guys are known from subfossil remains. They believed to get about a meter tall and may have weighed up to 10 to 17 kilograms in the wild. And the dodo's appearance is not that well known. It's been evidenced only from really drawings, paintings, and written accounts from the 17th century. And these vary considerably, with often some illustrations are known to have been drawn by live specimens. The exact appearance remains kind of unresolved, and a little is known about its behavior, though we do have some pretty good paintings of what the dodo looked like from some people, so that's what it's believed to, like a little bit more of a brownish and like a little bit of a green bit, blue bit here, a little bit of a interesting appearance for this guy. So this one's not completely spot on, though it's often depicted with a brownish grey plumage, yellow feet, a tuft of tail feathers, a grey naked head, and a black, yellow, green beak. So that's kind of what like the cultural zeitgeist and kind of how the people thought of it, kind of the popular version of it, but the accurate version is much different. It's much more tall and brown and had some really interesting colours. I think I've showed it off a couple times within Planet Zoo as well. That's pretty much the spot on one. So this guy also had gizzard stones to help digest its food, which is thought to have included fruits, and its main habitat is believed to be the woods of drier coastal areas of Mauritius, where it lives with animals like other big birds, giant tortoises, things like that. And one account says the clutch consisted of one single egg, and it's presumed that the dodo became flightless because of the ready availability of the food and the absence of predators on its island home of Mauritius. So that's a very common thing that happens on islands. Oftentimes when animals get onto islands, they will evolve to slow down their breeding so they don't overpopulate since there's not much predators. When they get bigger, to take advantage of different resources, things like that. We'll talk about that in another thing. So the first recorded mention of the dodo was from a Dutch sailor in 1598, and in the following years it was hunted by sailors and invasive species such as pigs and such, and while this habitat was being destroyed. The last widely accepted sighting of a dodo was in 1662, and extinction was not immediately noticed, and some considered it to be a myth. In the 19th century, research was conducted on a small quality of remains of 4 specimens that had been brought to Europe in the early 17th century. Among them are a stride head, which is the only soft tissue that's known to remain from dodos. And since then, a large amount of subfossil material has been collected from Mauritius, and which showed that it was a recognized problem, that this was pretty much unthought of, that humans could make something go extinct. So that was kind of a revolutionary thought at that time, and actually became pretty popular in the general culture, including Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. You can see a dodo in there, and also has been a fixture of pop culture, seen in things like Ice Age, and often the phrase "dead as a dodo" that kind of comes up, which is really sad because people think they're dumb and stuff like that, but no, they were just naive. Most animals, when they go into islands, they are naive to predators, so this guy would have been a victim of that. Still a really wonderful animal, nonetheless. It's really sad that we lost them, but there is potential with de-extinction to bring them back from extinction. Watch them jump up. Pretty huge too, as I mentioned, a meter tall. A really, really interesting animal. Kind of like the big herbivore. And there was lots of plants that relied on them. They would have eaten seeds and spread them around the island. And there was a little bit of surrogacy, so a lot of these, the dodo tree was almost going extinct, or they were threatened because of these guys went extinct. They reintroduced, not reintroduced, but introduced turkeys to kind of replace the dodos, and the trees have kind of started to make their way back. But yeah, still a really wonderful animal. Good animal to research on, and shows how humans affect ecosystems, especially island ecosystems. That's something I keep seeing because I live in New Zealand, and it's like, ugh. But yep, we're going to move on to the next animal. So this one was done by Serbia again, with the skin done by Jack Mills. I believe it's based off the Safari Limited model, but we have got Chinlesaurus, who's a really cool animal. Oh, no, that's not what we wanted. So what is this weird guy? Look at him. Isn't he weird? He is a... his name means horned lizard for Syringosaurus, and is an extinct genus of archosauromorphs that's related to crocodiles and dinosaurs. And he is known from the Middle Triassic of India. Okay, let's see if we can stop you and talk about you there. Really weird guy. There we are. We'll get it. We'll get you while you're here. Really interesting looking fella. So this guy is called an Electrocute, which is a really weird group of herbivorous reptiles from the Jurassic, and is known it is more closely related to the smaller and better known Dinosaurus from the family Exolodoridae. And this guy is a really remarkable example of convergent evolution. As you can see here, he's got these little horns here, which have been often very much compared to Triceratops and other ceratopsians, and also shares a bunch of different features like the long neck and such of and the teeth are very similar to sauropodomorphs, so like sauropods and there's early sauropods and things like that. So a very interesting animal. And it's believed that they would have occupied a similar niche at this time because there were not many other large herbivores. This would kind of be the equivalent of a sauropod or a ceratopsian back at the time. So these guys were also pretty huge. These guys got to an estimated 3 or 4 meters long, or 9 to 13 feet long, and had these really boxy heads and a long neck and a large barrel shape with really huge deep shoulders and ribs, really big forearms, and is most recognized for these. You can see these horns here that curve down. It's really interesting. And even though the skull is not completely known, what preserves indicate that it had a really deep skull looking like this with these horns. And is obviously, as I mentioned, being compared to ceratopsians. And there's actually another evidence of this specimen, another species, or not a species, another specimen of this animal that is believed to be a female. So it's believed also to be sexual dimorphic. So males would have had these horns like these and females did not. It's very hard to tell sexual dimorphism in the fossil record, but it's still really cool to see that we have some evidence of that. And the horns themselves you see here would have had these rough keratin sheath, like most horns do, which obviously would have looked longer than the bone core, so it's possible it could look really interesting and long. So I mentioned this guy was found in the Dinosaur Formation of India, that is from the late Archean stage in the Jurassic, and is in the family Zuridae, which is related to a really early group of archosaurs, so it's kind of an archosauromorph, more closely related to Trilophosaurs like Tetrapelodon and a lot of those really weird Jurassic weirdos. And the function of these horns is believed to be a product of sexual selection, since they haven't been found in the females, though it's also that they could have been used as partly defense. And also one specimen has actually been found with malformed vertebrae in its neck that believed it could have been fused, which may have been a birth defect, partly arthritis, or a disc infection. So it's very interesting. This also shows that this was from an adult animal, so it's very likely that the injury or the effect of this pathology didn't affect its life much. And also one of the vertebrae also had a healed fracture, so we don't know what injured it, but it shows that the animals had a bit of a rough life, but they managed to keep trucking on anyway. Really cool animal. I love these archosauromorphs. The Triassic is such an underrated time in prehistory. It's just so interesting. So novel. Watch him have another drink. I have the Syringosaurus model from Safari Limited, and I'm pretty sure they are the same colour. Really interesting colour. Good on you, Jack Mills, for the colour. So now we're going to be moving on to another weirdie. Not necessarily a archosauromorph weirdie, but we've got another dinosaur that's really shaken up how we know of them. So we've got another little guy here. We got Chinlesaurus. This guy was done by Echo Green. So let's have a look here. It's going to go for a drink, I bet. Okay, there we are. Look at this wonderful fellow. So, what is Chinlesaurus? So, he's a herbivorous dinosaur. I'm not going to go further into that because he's got a very complicated taxonomic history. This guy is known from the late Jurassic period of Chinle and is shown to have a bunch of traits of a bunch of different animals, including theropods, ornithischians, and sauropodomorphs. And so this genus is kind of like have a really big implications into the evolution of dinosaurs, whether it's traditional like the Saurischian, which includes sauropods and theropods, and ornithischian split is superior and or inferior to the new proposed group Ornithischielida, which means theropods are actually more closely related to ornithischians, so it's kind of not too different, but also really different. It's one of those things in taxonomy. So this guy is a really interesting animal here. You can see he's measured about 2.3 meters long from nose to tail, and the holotype is a smaller individual that's about half the length. And he's got these really cool scapular-shaped teeth, you can see here. And that's believed that it's very unique among Theropoda, which is referred to be a herbivore, indicating that he was a plant eater. You also see he has a bunch of different adaptations, including a backward-facing pubic bone, so it allows for more room for his guts. And the hind limb shows that he's actually less adapted for running and more for weight bearing, so that's why he got big. And also had defend himself with these strong arms. They also have a weight bearing first toe that you can see here. And also you can see he had these large claws on the forelimbs here. It just could have been used for defense. Extended outwards, maybe even to grab plants and such. So yeah, this guy was found in 2008, and I think described not too much later than that. And it was only later it was realized it was just such a different animal. Really, really interesting. So this guy was first placed in Tichinuridae, which includes animals obviously like Tyrannosaurus and Coelurosaurs and Allosaurus, like Allosaurus, and Megalosaurid such as Torvosaurus and Spinosaurus. But that really changed. And then also in 2017, there with Ornithischielida announced, or the idea pronounced, that would suggest that it was actually a basal sauropodomorph rather than ornithischian. So that's placed it as an... But that one is not really truly... There's not too much stock in that right now. But there's also potentially, it's an early sauropodomorph, a really early ornithischian as well. So that would have been related to animals such as Peninsulasaurus and before Neo-Ornithischia and Thyreophora, which includes the stegosaurs and chylosaurs. So yeah, very interesting taxonomy on this guy. That's what makes him so interesting. He has this guy, even though he looks unassuming, he's a 3-meter long dinosaur, not too visually extreme, but he shows tells a lot about the evolution of dinosaurs. And once we understand more and more about this guy, it'll tell us a lot about how dinosaurs came to be. So yeah, really, really cool animal. So yeah, now we're going to be moving on to our last big herbivore. This one was done by Lanensis. We have got Europasaurus. So really interesting, cool guy here. We can see he's based on Nigersaurus, but he had a rig edit so his neck stands up. Look at him run. Such a cool animal. So we'll wait for him to have a drink and then we'll talk about him. Such a cool animal here. So, Europasaurus is, you can tell he's a sauropod, but not as huge as the other sauropods. So, he is from Germany. He's a basal macroneurian sauropod, so he's a relative of animals like Brachiosaurus and Giraffatitan. He lives in the late Jurassic, about 154 million years ago, from northern Germany, and shows a really, really interesting pattern. As I mentioned with the Dodo, we get these animals that become huge, that's island gigantism. He is obviously descended from the sauropods, which are a group of very large animals, but he found himself on a small island and shrank. So this is a process called insular dwarfism, where big animals such as obviously sauropods elephants, hippos, deers, pretty much anything that's really huge. Because of the low availability of food and also the lack of predators, they tend to shrink down to a smaller size, as you can see here. And Europasaurus it's still a very huge animal though. It's believed to only measure about 6 meters long as an adult only, and the length has been estimated from partial femur. The youngest individuals known are about 3.7 meters, from 3.7 meters or 12 feet, and the youngest individuals 5.7 feet long or 1.75 meters. So this guy is. There's also other examples of insular dwarfism, such as Megarisaurus and other small titanosaurs that come later from this guy. And this guy is believed to be about 900 kilograms or 800 kilograms. So a little under a ton. Still a very, very huge animal. And aside from being a really small neosauropod, these guys have very unique characteristics, such as the premaxilla being curved anteriorly instead of pointing upwards, that's also very interesting. And when compared to Camarasaurus, they also have a different morphology from the post-orbital, as you can see here. And it shows that it's not quite as short, and the neural spines, you can see the pelvis unsplit. And also there are comparisons to Giraffatitan, were also mentioned. It's just shorter snout and a comparison between the humerus and the distal surfaces. So it shows it's like a very basal brachiosaurid, related to Brachiosaurus. So it's a machinarian. A really interesting animal. So, yeah. This guy is actually related to animals like a really early relative of Brachiosauridae. So this is a descendant. Its descendants would go to be Brachiosaurus and also the Titanosaurs. And another phylogeny also puts it as like just a basal machinarian, along with animals like Camarasaurus and Eophilus. What's really interesting about it. Also, there's been places of Brachiosaurids, so taxonomy is kind of neither here nor there. But you can see here, there's also, being a unique dwarf species, it's really interesting to look at their histology. So the smallest specimen, as I mentioned, is a young juvenile, and there's other specimens that are about 2 meters long, which are pretty likely to be juveniles. And you can see there are lines of arrested growth where animals will kind of grow, then in a bad season they will stop growing, and then you can leave their lines of arrested growth in the bone. So you can tell an animal's age from that. And it shows that the presence of the animal died after full size. So that's people like, why are these sauropods so small? But then it turns out that these guys would have had a largely reduced growth rate just because they're so small. And so they gain size slower than these Camarasaurus, which is pretty much opposite of other sauropods. They want to grow as fast as possible. And which is also really weird because this guy is also related to some of the largest dinosaurs known, such as Brachiosaurus and Sauroposeidon. But I also believe this proposal for the small size is believed to be part of a process, and you can see this in Dodo as well, is called pedomorphism, which means that animals retain juvenile characteristics as they get older, and it's a really easy way for animals to get big or adapt to not being able to fly or staying smaller, as they just don't grow as much, so they tend to retain these characteristics. So as I mentioned, these guys lived on an island. Germany was an island at the time during the late Jurassic, and a lot of these ancestors of these guys would have been swam to these islands and would have been like, oh, there's no predators here and there's a little lack of resources, so that they got smaller and smaller and smaller until they became Europasaurus. And there have been other evidence of animals like sauropods. Dodos are a good example of island gigantism. Elephants, there's populations of mammoths and Paleoloxodon falconeri, the ciliate dwarf elephant. As they get isolated on islands, they become smaller. And as I mentioned, this guy lived in the island, I think it was Hatzig Island or a different island, and lived with a bunch of other animals, such as a small dwarf diplodocid as well, potentially a stegosaurid, and a bunch of theropods. And also there's at least believed to be 4 different types of theropods in this locality, such as some megalosaurids, a member of the Allosauridae and Centrosauridae, and also Velociraptorine, which is pretty cool. Also a bunch of different lizards and things. So a very thriving ecosystem that lived on this dwarf island. So yeah, let's get ourselves watching him. A really cool design as well. It looks based off like pythons. I love that. Looks like he's going for a drink. Really wonderful animal. So yeah, this is part of the rig, so obviously you can't go too much more down, but still looks wonderful. I really love this animal. There's also a book that Joshua Canupe, who's a German paleo artist, he released, and it goes to like the story of an individual, which is a really, really good book. I've been wanting to read it and wanting to buy it. Just obviously shipping from across the world is probably not a good idea during the pandemic times, but still really, really cool and a really wonderful model. Great Europasaurus. I love these guys. So yeah, we'll be finished with you today. We're going to move on to the carnivores. So we've got another carnivore here. We have got Daemonosaurus by Sweetener. So have a look at this guy. Okay, so this is another weird little guy. He's a possible theropod dinosaur from the late Jurassic of New Mexico. Also been found in the Chinle Formation, which is the latest Jurassic in age. Oh, let's stop him there. No, it's not what we want. We'll just stop him there. Look at him. Isn't he wonderful? Wonderful little man. I think I may have already covered him, but he's still a wonderful animal. So, Dermatosaurus is likely a very spatial theropod, if not if one at all, or lies outside the class of Neurotheropoda, which has most of the theropods that you know and love, like Tyrannosaurus, Spinosaurus, Torvosaurus, things like that. So as I mentioned, these guys are found in the Chinle Formation, but it was originally found in New Mexico. It's found on Ghost Ranch, along with all those Silophysis. This guy has, based on proportions of the relative, you can see this guy is probably about 1.5 meters long, with the other estimates suggesting he might be up to 2.2 meters long, or 7 feet long, and weighed up to 22 kilograms, or about 50 pounds. And you can see his skull is pretty different when you compare them to other Jurassic theropods. They've got much shorter skull. And you can see they've got the prominent forward-facing teeth in the jaw and stuff, which are called cucumbent teeth. And they also have a pretty large orbital, so that means they had a pretty large eye. And suggests that it was actually a juvenile as well, since these often large juveniles have these eyes. That's what they first thought, but they also thought that the fusion of the neurocentral sutures indicated on the vertebrae that it was a mature individual, so it's very likely mixed, but potentially a mature individual. And this guy is being considered a basal theropod that lies outside Neotheropoda, which a group that includes more advanced Jurassic theropods like Silophysis and their descendants, as I mentioned, Tyrannosaurus, Spinosaurus, Allosaurus, things like that. And this also tells us a lot about dinosaurs. It represents a lineage that was the early dinosaur radiation and includes animals such as Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus. And also another phylogenetic analysis indicated this guy was closely related to animals like Tawa, so even more basal than that. And yeah, really, really cool little animal here. And this guy, as I mentioned, found in Ghost Ranch with animals like Silophysis, would have lived in a very diverse community, such as with Rhynchocephalians, Archosauromorphs, along with other archosaurs, such as Phylosaurs, Crocodilomorphs, Shuvosaurids, and other dinosauromorphs. So really, really diverse little ecosystem that's going on in the Chinle Formation, which is really, really cool. And yeah, we'll have a talk about this guy. So a lot of these dinosaurs, like Chauliodus and things like that, I really love them because they're not necessarily the most interesting such visually, but they tell us so much about dinosaur evolution and how dinosaurs came to be. So I think that's really, really interesting to include animals like this in these spotlights. So yeah, we're going to move on from, this is the last animal. We're going to be looking at, this is not a dinosaur, but we have got a really nice one. This was done by Hendricks and Maxley. This is very, very obviously inspired by the Walking with Dinosaurs design. We have got Ophthalmosaurus. So he's a wonderful guy. We know he's floating, but that's just how mods do be. So what is Ophthalmosaurus? Ophthalmosaurus is a genus of ichthyosaur. His name means eye lizard. So it's believed to be from the late Jurassic, but also maybe in the Cretaceous, the early Cretaceous it may have lived in. So this gets its name eye lizard because of its very large eyes compared to other ichthyosaurs. And there have been major fossil finds that have been found in Europe and South America, in the north of South America. So let's get him forward here. So as you can see here, he's got this really long body. I believe he gets about 6 meters or about 20 feet long, and has this toothless jaw that you can see here used to catch squid and things, or the soft-bodied prey. So you can see it's also got these really, really huge eyes that's believed to be about 220 to 230 millimeters in diameter, or Chief came to fame as those eyes. There's huge eyes which are very large in proportion to its body, and also has these very, very huge cycloric rings, which are a ring of bones in the eye that help keep it from imploding. So it helps it keep itself maintain the shape of the eyeball at depth. This animal is actually believed to be a diving deep diver, similar to like the beaked whales or sperm whales of today, where it would dive deep to hunt for prey, using those big eyes to see, taking as much light as possible to find food, where the animals like sperm whales and beaked whales today use echolocation. So this guy is more closely related to more basal groups of ichthyosaurs, so related to it's in its own group, sort of Ophthalmosauridae, related to the animals like Morilosaurus and Captocetus, I believe he pronounced his name, or Cantonetes, I mean. And that's where it's kind of lists, but there's not a lot known about the intricate relationships between marine reptiles, just because they're not that well studied. But as interesting as I mentioned, these guys are actually very famous for being found to give birth, unlike a lot of other reptiles. They will give birth to their pups' tails first, so kind of similar how to whales do it, so that avoids drowning. And there have been over 50 pregnant females found with litter sizes that range from 2 to 11 pups, so they clearly produce a lot of babies. And Ophthalmosaurus is likely could die for about 20 minutes, even though that's pretty conservative. They would have dived about 600 meters or more during a dive, which is considered the mesopelagic zone. And we also have evidence of depression sickness in these guys, called the bends. A lot of divers expect that, get that, whales get it as well. As you can see in the bone joints that have usually caused by invasion tactics. You can see it in whales today. They get the bends when they need to dive fast to escape from predators. That's when they can't decompress properly, and that's when they usually get the bends. But yeah, still a really, really cool animal here. Really cool about the ecology of these guys. Ophthalmosaurus is pretty cool. And you can obviously see this is inspired by the Walking with Dinosaurs design, which is obviously very influential in history. Probably one of the best designs there is. It's really nice to get a marine reptile as well, especially with Jurassic World Evolution 2. I'd love to see this port on the Ichthyosaurus, or if we don't already get it in game, that'll be fun. I really love the marine animals from Jurassic World Evolution 2, but really excited to show this guy off to learn a little bit more about the ichthyosaurs. You happy there, buddy? He's probably finished there. Oh, he's really having a feed. I think he's finished. So yeah, we'll have a look at this guy as he comes down. Obviously he's floating. It would be in water, but we don't really have aquariums in Jurassic World Evolution 1, but we do in 2, so that'd be cool to see him in 2. But yeah, I think this would be a good place to end the video. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to click the little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.